Welcome to Cybersecurity Where You Are, the Center for Internet Security's podcast. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO at CIS.
And I'm Tony Sager, Senior Vice President and Chief Evangelist at CIS. Cybersecurity affects us all, whether we're online at home, managing a company, supporting clients, or running a state or local government.
So join us on Wednesdays as we discuss trends and threats, explore security best practices, and interview experts in the industry.
Together, we'll clarify these issues, creating confidence in the connected world.
Hello and welcome to the show Cybersecurity Where You Are. I'm Sean Atkinson, CISO here at the Center for Internet Security, joined by the host with the most, the Hall of Famer, the difference maker, Mr. Tony Sager. Tony, how are you, sir?
Great, Sean. Great to be back as always. And never tire of that introduction, even though it's a bit much.
If I could, it'd take half hour to do everything that you've done. So, as you can see, it's me and Tony today, and we're starting a little series here called The Translator's Dilemma. What we're trying to think about here is how the CISO communicates between different parts of an organization through their own organization to leadership, to boards, things of that nature. And it's an evolving, what I would say, skill in this space, Tony, that is one I've tried to develop, and really a lot of lessons from you, because what I've learned, really as we go down this path, is telling a story. And I have the storyteller in cybersecurity right here. Yeah. And so we wanted to bounce some ideas off of each other in terms of just a conversation about how we go through this process. And we'll be talking about different dynamics as part of this series as we move forward. Now, as we go through this, Tony, one of the things that I've seen and some of the narratives on LinkedIn and some of the social media is the role of the CISO. We've seen all the way from, this is like a 2-year position for most in organizations. They're in, do the work, and then move on. Either that's through just burnout or opportunities because there's a need for talent in different parts of different organizations, even transitioning into different roles. And that's a different dynamic than we've seen with some of the other kind of C-level professional elements. So my task here to start us off is how I would describe this as a role today in a single sentence, and how would it differ?
Wow. Okay.
So here's the challenge, and then we'll just discuss this one sentence for the rest of this period.
I love it.
But I think if I was to describe, I think the CISO's role now is translating risk that's palatable to all layers of the organization. And that's really where I see this approach, is looking at it from a risk-based perspective versus a compliance, GRC perspective, an engineering perspective, architecture. Really feel the CISO's role is to lead that discussion of risk. So that's a little bit more than a single sentence, but that's where I'm laying it out, Tony. And I really want to get your thoughts there, because it may differ from what we've seen. And obviously the CISO role is a young role, let's say, from an organizational perspective. Not as young as the chief AI officer, but maybe in our teens, early 20s compared to some of the others. But I want to get your thoughts there, if I could.
Yeah. Well, two quick openers, Sean. One is that you're sharing the importance of communication, right? The skills, and it can be storytelling, but it could be in different forms, of course. And one of my themes that led me down the path here was to recognize, right? I was hired because I had a degree in math and some technical potential, right? But what I never understood till I get in the workplace was you will spend an extraordinary amount of your professional life explaining things to other people, convincing them to join your team, convincing them of a position left or right, asking for resources, explaining your work to people that don't have the same background as you. It's amazing how much time you spend doing that. And that turns out to be, I think, a major career differentiator for folks, right? Very few of us are so talented, certainly not me, that you can, leave them in the corner, throw them some money and raw meat or whatever, and they pump out brilliant technical papers and, patentable ideas or whatever they do. Most of us are completely enmeshed in the web of coworkers, partners, and allies. And so I just never appreciated till I got to the workplace, and years into the workplace, how important your ability to communicate is. And so there's the skill, and there's craft, there's There's techniques associated with that. But it's also, it's important to be able to separate the skill of telling from the creativity in creating the story, right? What is the story that would resonate with other people, that would sort of help them see the problem in their terms, right? What they're trying to solve. We didn't discuss this, but I love your word, translate. That is really the job. I often talk about our work at CIS. We are translators from esoteric tech data and tradecraft of bad guys and business use of technology. Yeah, I mean, that stuff is fascinating if you have the right people and the time to read it all, but very few of us do. But why would you read it? Because you want to know what to do about it, right? Unless that's your business. So the translate is actually quite complex and really important. So that's your focus. And I think you're right on the money. So the skill part is is correct. And yeah, somewhere in there was a great sentence, that job of translating risk. And we treated the history of the business has been primarily about technology and threats and all that. That's the world that folks like me grew up in and that we've lived in. And but this, as we've matured, right, and thought of the business of cybersecurity, it now competes in a different domain. My model, which was actually pretty successful, pretty happy place for folks like me, right? All I have to do is walk into your world, point out all your flaws, give you some PowerPoint, and walk away with no responsibility to fix it. Man, is that a great job? Take it if you can get it, but it doesn't solve any problems. And so translate, right? What is the view of this from the point of view of corporate decision makers or staff people or researchers in a different part of it? That, again, there's a skill part, but really, I think that's where you're going here is you have to be able to create the thing that resonates, the story, right? What is the problem as seen by other people? So the purpose of cyber and tech is we're not doing that for its own sake. We're doing it so people can, right in the state and local government context in our work, right? Can we deliver services to the public with greater confidence, with greater fidelity, and so forth? That's the problem that really is there to be solved. And we are contributors to that problem. But it's a mistake to see us as the solution. And then the last thing, I thought the sentence you were going to go with was, remember the old common wisdom, the CISO is the person that's hired to be fired.
Exactly.
Right, the one to blame. So that's a pretty tight sentence, but I'm not sure that's the story we want to tell.
Yes, the scapegoat clause that we have in all of our contracts.
Very good. Very good. Sure.
Yes. No, I think you're, again, 100% right, because this is, one of the challenges I've had, and this is something I've had to learn. This is something not necessarily taught from respectfully to be a CISO, right? There is no, I would say, defining book that says this is how you do it, nor are there with other roles within an organization. But here it's been trying to meet members of the organization where they are. And in some cases, one of the things I've always tried to bring to the table is it's not just me having to do the translation. There is a shared responsibility of cyber security within an organization. This is a business risk, and we've got to share that in some cases. So in some elements, and part of, one of my part-time jobs is to educate. So being an adjunct professor. And I have found such value in that, being able to relate technical elements to students, to executives, that it builds a skill, as it were, to be a teacher, to be someone that can take these very complex topics and try and put it in a way that's understandable. Now, we've had Dr. Tyler Moore several times on the podcast, and I had used some of his work with the return on security investment in terms of trying to frame cybersecurity risk into dollars and cents. When we look at the boards and C-levels, it usually have a predominance of financial information and financial vernacular that they're very familiar with. And so it's trying to adapt my concerns into that same language, as it were, to do the translation. And it has helped. But then when the posit becomes, well, how did we get these numbers? And then having to go through all of the so the security economics course that Dr. Tyler Moore put together, I mean, this is high level mathematics. And then going through Bernoulli curves from a 0 and 1 to whether this is negative and positive, and that this aligns or aligns to a certain perspective in the space, then it starts to get complex. And then now I have to then go back, okay, now then I've got to teach this next level. And so it becomes a teaching cycle in some cases.
But that's the right discussion, though. As you said, you're learning to reframe it in the language of the decision maker or the person you're trying to convince, et cetera, right? And they have legitimate, complex problems to solve. But every dollar spent on cyber defense is a dollar. It's not a profit. It's not being spent on employee safety or regulatory compliance, or there's so you have to find a way to compete, right, for attention. And the older model was the kind of parallel path, right? And I again, growing up in a military context, military organizations, and it became obvious early and frustrating where the decision maker, and these are all like, gather all the facts, put together a package to make a decision. The senior decision maker accepts the risk or they do not accept the risk. And how many times I saw that senior, these are hard charging multi-stars on their shoulder kind of people, right, who keep us safe, out of frustration yell, I accept the risk. They listen to all this. And that's not a rational, knowledgeable acceptance or understanding. It's frustration, right? Because they got the deep Bernoulli curves first, or they got the esoteric, the red team walk through your perimeter. And what does that mean to me? In other words, we flooded them with our view of the world, but they're trying to decide, is it, the polite term is project force. Can I confidently project force, achieve the goals of the United States military, whatever. It's a really different view of the problem. And so being able, again, you're not going to be in that position, but you have to appreciate they have really a hard problem to solve. You are one of 1,000 things that they're trying to integrate into a decision. And so you're useful to the extent that you can help them, right? Put it into context. And again, it's not easy, right? It does require then some translation, your verb of importance. And that's why I always said, the verb that matters in cybersecurity, that if you kind of look at it from I'll say top government level, government, legislative, share. That's the verb that matters. Share. If we all would just share about all the incidents, and then we'd be wise and we would know what to do. Nonsense. It's translate that matters, right? Because most of us cannot absorb 1 million data points. It's not human. But the translation of it to say, are there categories, bins, types? Can we deal with this thing not one by one, but at a more abstract level? And what does that mean? At the end of the day, I need to have my IT people do something, or I need to have business processes in place that protect some property that's important to me. And so that translation really matters. But I think, again, rethinking that, and then again, a lot of these detail. What you want, though, is a story that has fidelity to the truth, right? You can create all kinds of stories, but you want to be able to say, and the 1% or 10% that want those details. They want to dig into the mathematics. They want to look at the curves. They want to see it's there. And then we've taken that approach at CIS, like with the community defense model. We've had the team on here before, which is very few people are going to read past the executive summary. We know that, right? Because they're going to believe that all that detail is good under the hood. There are a few that want to read it, so you can't let that just slide with sloppy analysis or a made up story. So you want fidelity underneath there, and so having both is really vital for the long term, but also, again, put it in the perspective of the decision maker. And again, your role is critical to that, right? Because you get to see risk from the perspective of the board, help present the discussion, but also take this particular area that most are not going to have a technical background in, the IT-ish, cyber stuff, and then bring it into that same picture. And again, to do it with truth behind it, right, with fidelity, and at the same time, most of the details are under the hood.
Exactly right. One of the I don't know if you've ever heard this, Tony, but like communication and translation and these soft skills, these are some of the hardest skills I've ever had to gain. So I'm not sure why we call them soft. So I like
Well,
to say business skills.
well said. I never considered that, but you're exactly right.
Yeah.
And soft sort of implies, lesser intellectually or weaker or something. There's something there, right? And it's an afterthought. You're hired for your technical skills, your brilliance with IT or mathematics or engineering or whatever you do. It's the soft stuff. It's just something you add on at the end. But again, my experience was, who's going to give you resources if you can't explain into their language, right, what you're trying to accomplish? If you can't present or the argument that allows people to see the opportunity to work with you as opposed to compete with you, those are really vital. So they're not add-ons. They're just part of the professional life. Not everyone is going to, develop and execute those skills equally, right? We don't need to. That's how I kind of find my niche. I'm going to reveal to you one of my, early struggles, Sean. I wind up at NSA, right? This unbelievable, and then right in the middle of the math community for defense, and I'm going, I can't carry the textbooks of these people. I mean, they're really smart, and it was great. People were wonderful to me, but at some point, I realized I had a different set of skills. And that led me down a different path, right? And they're not better or worse; they just happen to be different, right? And help me help others get past this. The boss doesn't understand, or why won't they take the path that makes sense? Or in the other direction, one of the techniques I had when I moved into the executive ranks was I had what they tell you to do in management stuff, but most of us can't do because it's too embarrassing. I had a designated truth tellers, a handful of people. I grew up in a particular area, right? And as I got into these higher level jobs with lots of responsibility, I turned back to some people, and some of them you actually know, with this conversation. I'm taking these kinds of jobs, and I'm doing my best. But I need you to tell me when I'm wrong, when you believe I am wrong from a technical perspective. And I will treasure that, respect that, etc. And I ask you to respect me in return. Because in life, the best technical answer often does not win. I have to deal with politics and competing priorities and budgets and rivals, organizational goals. And so I will do my best to find the best path through there. I need to hear from you. That's just the responsibility that we have to each other, right? At the same time, you have to, and I will explain to you, why I choose a path, because that's my responsibility back, is to help you see that. But again, we have to understand, the world that each of us is working in. And, if I did something clever, I wasn't really a great manager, Sean. I'm revealing to my audience. But if I did one thing clever, it felt like it was that, right? That I had folks that I knew were brilliant and that I could trust, whose judgment was just off the charts. At the same time, they tended to be impatient with it. What do you mean politics? What do you mean budgets? What do you mean? And so helping, temper they would get angry, or, the world is wrong if the technical answer doesn't win. Well, I don't know about you, but I live in this complicated world where, yes, there is no one technical argument that will always sway the day. And you just have to figure out to navigate, or do you give up a battle to make progress in the war? That's a strategy, right? And you have to be able to express that in a way that people can accept. They might not like it, but we find ourselves in these compromised positions, or I give now to get better later. And this is just the life that you live. And again, you get to see it. I used to, for the audience, they may have heard me refer to you as the speaker to boards or whisperer to boards. That is a complicated place between, as the translator, the negotiator of the board view of the company's purpose and progress with the leaderships, with the technical. And so you're that's what you do. I've often thought that was a pretty tough job.
It is. We're going to take a quick break so I can refresh, and we'll come back.
Absolutely.
But we'll take a quick break, Tony. But when we come back, one of the things I do want to talk about is the feedback mechanism to improve communication. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back to discuss that. Zero-day attacks involve vulnerabilities with no fix. They lurk in the shadows without your knowledge, getting up to no good. This doesn't bode well for your endpoint security. With zero-day threats hidden in plain sight, most MDR solutions simply aren't up to the task. You need something different. Turn on the lights with CIS MDR. Available exclusively to paid members of the MSI SAC, CIS's MDR delivers more than alerts. Delivers action by transforming raw telemetry into clear prescriptive steps. CIS does this using behavioral analysis, helping you stay protected against zero-day attacks and other threats you don't know about beforehand. Especially coupled with the 24/7/365 CIS SOC as your full-time cyber defense partner. And let's not forget CIS MDR's hosting options in the GovCloud and commercial cloud, supporting your compliance needs. Fully managed and monitored, flexible hosting, CIS MDR's got your back. So get started today by visiting cisecurity.org. So Tony, before the break, you were talking about where we've got these lessons, we've got the feedback coming from different parts of the organization. And one thing that really set me to a different level, again, as mentioning, these types of skills, some of the hardest I've had to develop over time. It's not just the technical capability, it's an ability to take that information and provide it to multiple different audiences in a way that's consumable and that resonates. So I got feedback from the board, as you mentioned, whispering to the board, and I got maybe a little bit louder than a whisper back in terms of
Yeah. Okay.
here's how to approach, writing and things of that nature. And it was really John, our CEO, who said, why don't we just take a quick look and review some business writing elements? So I got the Better Business Writing from HBR, a little book, and just reviewed that. And what it did, it reframed the way I was approaching explanation, because there is a difference between a regular, let's say, board for another company to the CIS board. So in some ways, I was going about the approaches from an academic, like teaching approach, and it was, you're trying to teach the wrong people. They already know you need to be at this level. You need to structure it this way. And I feel for a lot of CISOs as well, that's good to be able to gauge your audience and to meet them where they are. And in some cases, you're not going to do it right the first time. You just don't know their level of knowledge in terms of what can I contextualize and how do I translate it in such a way that resonates with you, where they may, I've got technical degrees from multiple universities. You don't need to dumb it down necessarily, or you don't need to teach me these elements. Where I need you to meet me is, why does it matter to me, and what do you want from me in order to move and adjust or treat this risk? And that was profound, because it was, one, again, getting that type of feedback and being able to sort of tailor based on their conversations, the vernacular that they used, helped to then define an approach that I think was, hopefully it was well thought through, takes effort in order to do. But I really then feel, to your point as earlier, where it was you spend most of your time doing this translation, that helped reduce the translation time and got more meaning, got more value through the conversations we were having to take action, versus, I don't know what you're talking about, or you're off the mark, or the way you've communicated didn't either identify there was a risk, in the way it's being presented, or it was taken, this is a 5-alarm fire, but it's no. I just want to bring awareness to this situation. And those types of things constantly change. And specifically in the risk space, it's so dynamic that we have to adjust and bring that type of contextualization to the table. And if we don't, Tony, I just think it leads us down a path of frustration from both sides in a lot of cases. And that's not what you want, right? You want a clearer communication channel to take action as quickly as possible.
No, and I think what really resonated with what you said, the story that you told, Sean, and was this distinction. And these are not entirely distinct, but teaching versus communicating. Right. So folks like us, we come from a technical background, and we see the world in technical terms, right? And so we get in that habit of teaching, and sometimes that's really important. But communicating is a different order of thing, right? It's also knowing the audience, and you have some of the elements, certainly have elements of that in teaching, but it's really focused on the problem that they're trying to solve, their language and all that. And I think that's a really crisp way to talk about this here. But it also, another of the really difficult soft skills is somewhere in here is a bit of humility and empathy, right? The ability to switch your context to how others people see the world, and to be able to absorb that and then take action upon it. And that is perhaps more rare than we want it to be in technical folks, right? A number of the folks, we deal with folks that are incredibly brilliant at what they do. And, that's why that soft skill is so hard. We have to be able to say, we're not smart at one area does not mean you're smart in every area. And the skill of communicating, right, requires being able to change your context, to see the problem from someone else's point of view, to understand their language and decide, what are they trying to accomplish? And your goal, then you shift your thinking to how do I help them with their complicated problems? And what is it that I know that they need to be able to bring into that decision frame as they think about these problems? So thinking about that, I think, is a really critical part of this also. And again, it's not natural for all folks. I think you have to be able to, but it's trainable. That's the good news, right? That is, you could think about it. So you gave a great story of, kind of rethinking your approach to the board, and that's sort of one of the basic lessons to me of communication and public speaking and the things I've done. I started to give talks on public speaking as a craft itself, right? And how it's not about entertainment. One of the titles is From Entertainment to Action. In other words, there's a purpose to this. I didn't start speaking in public because I wanted to be entertaining or I wanted to be popular. You don't go to work at the National Security Agency because you think you're going to be in the public, at least not for a good reason, right? It'll be a scandal or some terrible thing. But when I learned to see it as it's a way to advance the mission, to create allies, to create understanding that we're not evil, back here hiding behind concertina wire. We're part of the industry. We're here to help. We're bringing content to help. That's when I saw it from those terms. I saw it as a professional skill. And how many people have come up to me to say, I could never do what you do. I'm too afraid to be on a stage. Hey, that was me in about year 2000, 2001. But, what helped was thinking of it as a professional skill to advance a professional cause, something we're trying to accomplish. Once I saw it that way, again, this is what helped me frame it. If it's a skill, I can get better. I can study the masters, right? I studied every public video I could find of Alan Towler, for example. And I studied, the craft, looked at masters, read the kind of books that you talked about. But I also studied creativity and storytelling as an art in and of itself to create the story. And then once I saw it in those terms again, it was crisper to me. And then it became less about me. That is, sometimes I don't achieve my goal, right? I don't convince somebody, or the audience doesn't react in a way that feels like it just didn't click. I'm no worse a person than I was, before I started that talk, but somehow I didn't read the audience well, or I didn't convey well. Okay, I can fix that. I'm not a bad person. I just didn't succeed with this skill. So I need to improve my skill. And that, again, for me, that helped me get over the, I could never do that. I couldn't stand on the stage or whatever. And I can't tell you how many people have come up to say that to me after a talk and said, let me help you with that, because I've been there. And it's okay.
Exactly.
You'll be okay if you kind of frame it in a way.
Definitely.
The way I described it.
Yeah. Well, I was sort of the same as you, in your early 2000s, as you mentioned. Yeah. So that's what pushed me to do the teaching piece was one, preparation, understanding the material, and then being able to sort of answer questions on the fly, from students and things like that, and build that sort of, I will call it scar tissue, really, in terms of having to go through this continuously. Yes. Sure. And I think you just get to a point where, it's, I would say confidence, but I think that's just knowing the material. You've got your message, And the way you can convey it is to, just challenge yourself to move into that space, to a public speaking. It's so rewarding. And again, like you've studied Alan, I've studied you. And
Oh,
our conversations that we've had here,
sure.
and the way you frame and the way you bring that storytelling narrative, and it just, you have it starts big, and then you get to the crescendo, and then it's, here's the message, and it's like, wow, it paints a picture that you couldn't really do. I mean, beforehand, mine would have been in black and white or just a complete white canvas. I couldn't paint the picture, and you just got to
Yeah.
develop that. And I think, like you say, it's practice. It's a skill, and that's
Well,
something to
one
continually
of the things
assess.
that you learned in teaching, I suspect, right? That I learned, and there's a quote that I keep around somewhere. It's basically this: I write so that I can understand what I'm thinking, and that is the act of teaching. I did a little side teaching when I was a kid and taught programming and stuff. In my youth, boy, there's nothing more humbling than trying to teach. And it forces you to rethink, recalibrate constantly. And the things that are so crystal clear in your brain, when they come out of your mouth, this jumbled mess and non-sequential, it's like, wow. And that's one of the reasons I write, is it forces you to say, what is the point? What is the framing? What is the flow that takes someone from A to Z? That's really, and it can be hard. I have spent hours on a one-page write-up, and sometimes it just flows, but a lot of times it's really hard because I have to think about it. But what's satisfying is that it causes this things that seem so obvious, so clear, so logical in your brain. It forces you to think it through in a way that can be coherent when you see the entire thing at once.
Right.
Because what's in your brain, you forgive every logical leap, and
Exactly.
but you can't get about that. And I had a person I worked with for a while who was the master of the 1-2 page thought piece,
Yep.
and it would go through 20 iterations, and he'd ask for input, and some would work, and he would just, and he forced that discipline on himself. And in some contexts, like in military organizations, in certain organizations, the one pager is a treasured thing, right? If you can't put it on a page, then we're not going to discuss it. But there is a real skill to that, and it forces you. But again, your path was to teach, which again helps it come out of your mouth in a way that clarifies. One of the public speaking things that really worked for me, the communication things. And it's in the video I did about public speaking some time ago, was that never let the first time you hear those words, right, that are in your talk, be when you're on the stage. And I would read aloud my remarks. And that was actually, I did it out of frustration. Because again, I was working at the National Security Agency. Every word was expected to be, that was going to be in the public, was expected to be in a script approved by multiple layers of bureaucracy, right? For classification, for embarrassment to the agency, inconsistent message, whatever. And you were expected to go out in public and read from the script, read the script. And I said, when that happens to me, I'm insulted. That's not why I can read. I'm here to hear this person, right? And so how am I going to deal with that? Okay, well, I'm not going to memorize the thing, but what I would do, literally sit at my dining room table on the Sunday morning and read it out loud. And it's like this revelation. That doesn't sound like me talking. That sounds like me writing. And with bureaucrats, we write in a particular style. So I would rewrite it and say it out loud again. And I'm the guy in college. My first draft was my final. There was no second draft. I was like, I'm the laziest guy working to the last hour. But I would do that because I knew better. I wanted to come across, in a way that worked for me, which was this informal, conversational, storytelling way. Because I love that. That appeals to me. I look for that. So I wanted to come across a certain way. But the reading out loud turned out to be critical because I could, and then I would resubmit it, right? And I kind of rewrite the thing, and they would try to correct my grammar, my incomplete sentences. I said, no, you are authorized to check for classification, right, for inconsistent messaging, blah blah blah, but you're not there to correct my grammar because that's the way I speak. we naturally speak in incomplete sentences or references or whatever in a way that is different than the way we write. And they gave in on that one, right? Because the people that get those jobs over there are former English majors. They can't stand this bad grammar or incomplete sentences or whatever, yes. Or end the sentence with a preposition. So, but that turned out to be incredibly helpful for me, because then I didn't make the connection until later. What I'm doing is the things that are so clear in my head are not clear until I hear them, but come out of my mouth, right, and back into my ear. And that helped me find the voice and retell the story in a way that I could really believe in, right? So there is a confidence, right? You're, at the end of the day, you're not going to carry the day in that kind of context with your deep understanding and your Bernoulli curves. That only works for a very narrow audience. At the end of the day, people are going to look at you and go, I can believe that person. They can take me to the depth if they need to, but I get it. They clearly have thought about this. They've done their homework. It's about the confidence that you project. And we all find, how do we do that, right? Some of us are more academic oriented, right? It's clearly a person's PhD level, super smart. Some just have that physical thing, right? That presence, that voice that just, I knew I didn't have that one to work with. but I did say, I don't know if I shared the story with you, Sean. All my secrets are coming out. My wife once turned to me. She said, Tony, the one thing you have a certain geeky sincerity that no one can deny. I said, doggone it, you're exactly right. I got that. Hey, if I got it's not much of a superpower, but it is a superpower. And that's what you get, right? Yep. You get a sincerity that, hey, I care about this stuff. And that's a powerful confidence generator, right? In others that you want to use for good. You want to say, then, that enthusiasm, that sincerity can carry a long way. But you have to, again, so that's my way of projecting authority. It's not because of looks or voice or, academic credentials and academic authority. That works for others, and that's great. But you have to find what makes sense for you. You have to back it up, right? The story still has to be true. At the end of the day, the story is true, and I can go to whatever depth, in the fields I know. I can go to whatever depth people want, but I don't need to.
Right.
And I think that's, and all I do is confuse people if I do that, by the way. So here we are.
Fantastic. Well, this is the whole point of this little mini series, Tony, is to help others, learn from you, take my lessons learned, and I'm still learning. Again, as a CISO, I think you're continuously learning in many different areas. So we're going to go down this path together over a few episodes. Next we'll be talking about talking to the business. Then we'll talk about talking to the technical side, and then we'll bring it all together, maybe for part 4. So,
yes, Sean, absolutely. Yeah. Thrilled to be on this journey with you. I think it's a great idea. This was, for the audience, this was Sean's idea, but it's also true. We've discussed this before, Sean. Working on this podcast, I know more about the life of a CISO than I ever knew before. And so I really appreciate the conversations, because it just is not a job I've had or have been worked for or been directly. I've reported to many a CISO over decades, and learned, where I think I can add value to that. But getting to see it up close, right? This dealing with the board, dealing with the IT issues, the policy, the reporting, the auditing, and all that stuff. I give great credit for, my learning is, I've been your student, right back at you for a long period of time, for at least 180 or so episodes. Yeah. So happy to continue on with this series with you. And I'll learn some more, and maybe we'll share some of those lessons with our audience.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. And thank you to our audience. Any questions, make sure to reach out to us at podcast@cisecurity.org. Make sure to subscribe through your preferred podcast provider. Catch us on YouTube at the CI Security. And with that, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the podcast today.
The thoughts and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are solely theirs and do not necessarily reflect those of CIS.
Tune in on Wednesdays for a new episode. And in the meantime, visit our website at CISecurity.org.
Together, we'll continue our efforts of creating confidence in the connected world.